Welcome back to Capital Academy. Capital Academy is all about helping early stage and startup companies understand the processes that they're stepping into as they start looking for investors' money. When you are bringing in outside capital into your business, there are definitely other things you need to consider. So in today's show on Capital Academy, we're going to speak with a CFO who is very much involved in preparing and working with entrepreneurs in their projections. And we have an entrepreneur who is raising capital that needs to understand what happens relative to the projections. Now, the fun part is not only does our CFO understand in putting projections together, but he is also an investor, so he understands the other side of looking at them. So, Demet, please tell our audience who you are, what you do, as we step into this session.
Okay, my name is Demet Anagnos, and I'm the principal and founder of ResultsCFO. We are an outsourced CFO and accounting department for small to medium-sized businesses. We work with concept companies, building models for them on how to monetize their product or their concept. We work with startup companies to get them to the next level. We work with growth companies, companies that are experiencing their first real growth. Okay. And then we work with what we call mature companies, as well as companies that are in the exiting stage, where they're looking at their exit plan. And one of our philosophies, or one of our key things, is starting with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. So that plays well with the projection side as well as the investor side. Very
cool. Arion, please introduce yourself, tell us what you do and where you are in your process.
I'm Arion Long. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Femly, and we deliver organic feminine care on a monthly basis in the form of our Femly boxes. So we have subscribers that pay a nominal fee, and they actually pay their fee, go on our website, order their box, and they get an auto delivery every month at the time that they need it.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think this is a perfect place to really just start digging into what purpose, what is it that the projections are supposed to provide, and who are they providing it for?
Well, I look at it, there's two types of projections that you would be looking at. One, the cash flow projections, as well as profit and loss over a period of time, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, and the balance sheet, and how the profit and loss all flows to the balance sheet, so that you can look at a valuation for the company. Because as I said earlier, you want to start with the end in mind. So there's the operational side of the projections, which are the cash flow side of it, and then there is basically the valuation side, which is the balance sheet side, incorporating the profit and loss. So the entrepreneur and the angel investor, or the investor, is going to be really concerned with the valuation and the balance sheet and profit and loss. But to get there, they need to have the money to operate the business on a day-to-day basis. So that also is taken into consideration. The cash flow projections are taken into consideration to a large degree when you're looking at a projection model. So it's basically two different projection models that you're creating.
Okay. And let me just ask, so when we're talking about a startup company, how does that conversation change? Because they have nothing coming in at that point.
That's true, but they do have, at least with the startup companies that we work with, even if they haven't really done their research, we'll help them do their research to figure out, okay, what is their industry? What are they going to need 3 months down the road? What are they going to need 6 months down the road? What are they going to need a year down the road, 3 years down the road? What are they going to need, especially in your particular industry, your subscription as a solution or a subscription as a service business? Right. So how are you going to scale? What expenses are you going to have at 1,000 subscribers a month, as opposed to 30,000 subscribers, as opposed to 5 subscribers?
Right.
So you have to look at that when you're doing the operational cash flow, to make sure that you have the money to scale.
Right.
And then once you get to that point, so you have to look at, what are your business development costs? We tend to break businesses into 5 overhead groups. Right. Admin, business development, executive, financial, and operations. It makes it very easy when you're doing budget versus actual comparisons. It makes it very easy for it to be visual for an entrepreneur or business owner to be able to see their profit and loss or their cash flow just in those categories. And so therefore, they're not looking at 30 or 40 different expense categories and trying to figure out the trends. So you need to know, if I'm at 30 subscribers today, my customer support is this in cost. My technical support is this in cost. My goods that I'm purchasing to put in those boxes is this. My cost for the boxes is this. My cost for delivery is this. How does that change? What price points do you get and benefits do you get when you scale from 30 to 1,000 to 10,000? And what does it mean when you scale from 30 to 1,000? How many people do you need to bring on? What are your human resources? So you have to look at it, and you have to look at it realistically. And once you've got the expenses down, then you go back and you look at what the revenue side is going to be. And what we like to do is we like to be very, very conservative. So especially with startup companies. So if the entrepreneur comes in or the business owner comes in and says, we're going to make $10 million in the first year. I'm like, yeah, okay. What dream world are you living in? Let's break it down. Yours, if I'm not mistaken, your low end box is $9.99 a month.
Yes.
Correct? So think about $10 million in the first year. So that is, if it's $10 a month, that's $120 a year. Divide 120 into 10 million, and you know how many subscribers you have to have. So how are you going to get those 900,000 subscribers? You need business development money. So you have to understand your marketing, your branding, the awareness of your product out there. How are you going to generate that? So it all flows together, and then you drop in by doing what we like to do, interactive models for projections, where we say, okay, this is the assumption for revenue. We've already built our expenses based on one unit. And then it's very easy to scale. 1 unit, 10, 100 units, 1,000 units, 10,000 units. Here's what the expenses are going to be based on a percentage of what the total expenses are, or based on the unit. Then you go in and you can play around and get real excited by putting in 1,000 units. What's my profit going to be?
Well, I have to smile when he said get real excited. Working with numbers, now you as the entrepreneur, how excited are you getting hearing this? What does this information do for you? Does it resonate for what you've now gone through in building out your projections? What does this information, how does this information help you to see where you're going?
So it definitely resonates. Well, going through the process, it was very trying because there were so many different variables, and I was finding that as our subscriber base grew, we also got the perks of wholesale and bulk pricing on feminine care products. And you know, granted, our boxes went down, and you know, we changed our shipping model to include commercial and cubic shipping over being charged for the weight of the box. So that was pretty cool. So it definitely resonates, and there are so many different variables that go along with the cost of goods sold.
Were these, so what you're saying, were these learning curves for you? Were these things you did not know when you initially put your projections together versus what you found out as you began to actually bring revenue in?
Exactly. I found a lot of it out as I began to bring revenue in and compare. It was a huge learning curve. And you know, as someone that didn't foster an MBA and have that quantitative background, it was immeasurable, but it did help a lot, actually, applying it.
But I think that's just the sheer nature of being an entrepreneur. Early stage startup companies, when they're first starting and doing their projections, and we all think we could do everything ourselves. I can do my own business plan, which the template already includes the financials for the projections, and So you go through all of that, and you make up these numbers, and I don't totally mean it that way,
No,
but I mean it that way.
But a lot of times that's really what happens. I thank God that I had, you know, great mentors and an attorney who did this for a living and was able to sit down with me for 8+ some odd hours to figure it out. But even then, I found out what I projected was completely different than what he projected. So,
and I think that's the big thing with projections, and understanding that investors know that also. They know that projections are just that.
Right.
They're just some numbers, and unless there's enough quantifiable information that the entrepreneur doesn't yet know what things really look like or cost. Is
Right.
that fair?
That's fair. And most entrepreneurs start with the revenue side as
Right.
opposed to starting with the expense side. Most entrepreneurs, because they're in love with how much revenue they're going to make. And they think the gross revenue is what they're actually going to come out with at the end.
Right.
That's when they first get started, especially if you
Right.
don't have any experience with it. What we like to do is we always like to start with the expense side. As an investor, we look at the revenue side briefly at the beginning to see if there's a sense of reality with the entrepreneur. If there's not a sense of reality, we need to sit down with the entrepreneur and find out why they're thinking this revenue is going to be so much.
Right.
But then the most of the work is done on the expense side. And you say, how do you figure out expenses? There's a lot of ways to do that. There's tools out there to be able to determine it. We have resources where we can go in and we actually do scorecards. And we score a business based on similar sized businesses in their industry
That's good.
and look at what their expenses are, compare on a percentage compared to what the clients are. So every month we run a scorecard, or every quarter we run a scorecard, and basically it's not only just budget versus actual, it's how are you doing in comparison to other businesses in your industry. But it doesn't just have to be in your industry, because you're in the Washington metropolitan area.
Right.
Expenses here are a lot more than expenses even in Baltimore or in Richmond. So we can look at all businesses in a certain revenue range or a certain number of employees and look at their expenses, just general categories, and compare it to, like, how much are they paying for rent? How much are they paying in business development?
Right.
How much are they paying in utilities? Again, every business is specific. We have a commercial launderer where their utilities are their largest KPI, their key performance indicator, how much water, how much gas and electricity they're using. That is all tied to how many pounds of laundry goes through their tunnels every day. Another business like yours, that's not going to be a metric for it. That's not going to be the KPI. So we need to look at that. And then what we tend to do once we're working with a client for an extended period of time, we have created what we call the 360 cycle of success. It's a continuous cycle that basically you look at what your plan is, what is it that you want to work on during that period. You determine how you're going to implement that plan, what numbers or what things you're going to look at on a consistent basis during the period, whether it's a quarter, whether it's a month, whether it's a year, it doesn't really matter. And then you, based on what your actual numbers are compared to what your projections were, then you reassess. You go in and say, okay, well, my numbers are better than what I thought they were going to be. So what did I do to make that happen? I want to repeat that. Or if they're not as good, then you figure out what you did that wasn't so good, and you throw that out, and you don't do it again. And then you basically you go through the whole cycle again. And we do that process with our clients again usually on a quarterly basis.
So my question for you, as a consultant, if I just had to put on my consultant hat, I understand that most companies don't want to work with the consultant. The newer the company is, the less need they have for a consultant because they know it.
They know everything.
And I don't take anything away from them in that respect because that's part of their learning curve. For me, I know someone has to have been in business 2 to 3 years before they believe they want to hear somebody else's voice, right? When it comes to the projections, what is your assessment of a startup company really coming to someone like you to help them work through their projections versus them off on their own doing them?
First thing is they have to have an open mind. They have to realize that they can't do it themselves, okay? It takes a village, okay? So that's with everything. You have a different set of experiences that give you a certain perspective on what you do and how you look at something. Lorette has a different set of experiences. Her perspective is different. Mine the same. So why not take all three of our minds, put them together, and therefore we can look at a problem. And when you sit down with an entrepreneur and you talk in a collaborative sense, and you talk in a manner where you're working with them and you're not talking down to them, then they understand. When you can bring numbers to the table and show them or ask them questions that they have no answer to.
Right.
It's just like all those TV shows like Restaurant Impossible or, you know, Chef Ramsay when he walks into a place. Well, what's your cost of goods sold? Or what's this metric? Or what's that metric? First thing I always do is ask a business owner, what's your current ratio? And they look at me like, what's a current ratio?
Right.
Well, if you're looking for financing, every bank's going to look at your current ratio. And they're going to want, and if you're not within a certain parameter, you can kiss it goodbye right from the get-go.
Right.
So those are things when you bring those to entrepreneurs' attention, or when you talk about creating models that they don't know how to create to monetize what they're doing, they tend to have a little bit more openness to you coming on board.
Right.
I'll ask you the same question. As an entrepreneur, now I know you mentioned you work with an attorney who really helped you through.
Right.
Was that from the beginning, or did you get to the point that you had to get to someone to help you?
I got to the point where I realized that I needed the expertise of somebody who had been there, and it just pulled on whatever resources I had. And in the beginning, it was quite intimidating. A lot of the terminology was new, and in the very beginning, I thought that I knew it, but I did not have an accurate grasp on a lot of the concepts, so it was helpful.
So when you went to the attorney, was it more so to look at the more legal side of what you were doing, or was it truly because you went to an attorney and they helped you with numbers? So I'm trying to understand that.
It was truly my financial statement and my projections.
That is funny, and so I'll say we have a retiring attorney,
A recovering attorney.
a recovering attorney
Okay.
who's now a
Practiced law for
CFO.
15 years. But I like the numbers better.
Yeah.
And so it's that's where my question again is coming from. What would make you go to an attorney if you were looking for answers in your financial statement?
Because it was someone who I trusted who also did have that finance
Okay.
background.
So you knew they had
Yeah,
it.
and
Okay.
he does practice corporate
Okay.
and financial securities and whatnot. So
Okay.
I figured if someone knew numbers, that'd be the person to go to, at least within my scope of people
Right,
that I knew.
absolutely, your,
Yeah.
sector, your sphere of influence.
Okay.
I mean, getting back to what you were saying about the education aspect and it being intimidating, early on in our practice, we were introduced to a dentist who was the Doogie Howser of the dental world. She graduated high school at 13, went to college, was graduating dental school when she should have just been starting college. Very, very A personality, very, very intelligent, but she had no clue on how to run a business.
That sounds like me.
So it was fine, and she was introduced to us through her insurance agent.
Okay.
And she had just bought a practice, so she was 1 month into it. The practice was doing about $350,000 a year. She overpaid for it, but she didn't understand that. So, because she kept thinking, well, I know I'm going to make this down the road, so it's
Right.
okay to pay more. And I'm like, no, you pay for the value of what it is today, not what it is down the road, especially when you're the one buying it. But that was a whole other issue. But we worked with her for over a year on a monthly basis, taking different ratios and different numbers, to the point after about 18 months to 2 years, when we would send her monthly reports, she'd go, my current ratio's off, or my, why is this?
Had it, yeah.
She
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
So there's also an education process that you have to go through.
Right.
And sometimes most entrepreneurs got to do it on their own. There's companies or businesses like Capital Academy that can help you with
Right.
that. There's consultants out there that can help you with that. But if you don't know that they're out there, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
So it's a matter of increasing your sphere of influence, increasing your group that you can pull from, because everybody, it's like we said before we started, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
In your walking through working at Raising Capital, so I know you've done pitch events before.
Yes.
And so I know you've put your business plan in the hands of investors. What input have you gotten back from any investors, specifically as it related to your projections, if any?
The biggest indicator that everyone wanted more information about was my marketing, specifically because I'm in a space that is subscription-based and we could have the potential for retail placement and whatnot. So everyone wanted to know what our marketing plan and our marketing budget was in relation to the different milestones that we wanted to reach in a year, 5 years, 10 years, et cetera.
Do you have a sense that they were asking about your marketing because it wasn't measuring up to your projections? I'm saying that from a standpoint, when I review a business plan, I immediately go to marketing.
I believe so. I believe
in order
so.
to see if it matches. You know, someone tells me they're going to make $5 million when they start out at zero. I need to understand, well, what activities are you doing that's really going to, do you get the sense that that's where the questions were coming from?
I think that it was, especially because I think for our first year or so, we weren't supposed to be profitable or break even. But
most companies aren't.
Right. And that was something I didn't know in the initial phases of projections as well. Like, what? But it was a big deal. The marketing budget and marketing plan was a big deal because after a certain point, yes, I can get 1,000 subscribers from people that I know and love, but how do I get to 10,000? What are the things that I have to do differently? You know, right now I can use social media to get 1,000, whereas 10,000 I might have to partner with different organizations like, you know, press and news features, et cetera.
Okay, so you got the sense they were also asking to know how you were going to expand, as opposed to only reaching your numbers. Okay.
Yeah.
When, where, how, if you reached a point of reality in looking at your projections?
Whew, about a month in, it got really, it got real. It definitely got real, and I saw that some of the things that I thought would work weren't working, and then there were other avenues and other things that did work out. For instance, I thought that my demographic was different and I wasn't using any analytical data, so I got Google Analytics and a Facebook Pixel which tracked my website conversions and things like that. And once I started using my ads to target that demographic of women between, let's say, I might have been targeting all women of menstrual age, 18 to 49. Whereas my data was telling me target people 24 to 34. Those are the people that I'm getting the most traffic from. So a lot of it was just pivoting, looking at the data, seeing what worked, and just pivoting and making those tiny changes.
I think that is probably one of the big things that your early stage of startup companies need to understand. You're supposed to pivot. You get new data, you get new information, you turn to what that's telling you and stop trying to, but no, I know this is supposed to happen, you know?
One of the advantages of being a small business is the ability to be flexible and adaptable, and being able to turn on a dime and taking advantage of opportunities that you didn't know existed a day before or a month before. So that's why we stress that success cycle where you go through that process and you look at what's been successful, which is exactly what you did. You thought your demographic was this range, but in reality it was a smaller niche in that range, that age range. So when you throw out all the marketing that you were doing to the outside or the outliers of that range, and you just focus in on that narrow market, and you're going to end up selling more. You're going to get bigger bang for your dollar, and your return on investment on your marketing dollar or your ROI is going to be better.
And sometimes it is that dramatic. We recently had a smaller pivot, and it led to about 85 people signing up in 5 days, which took me months to get to prior. And you mentioned your dentist. I graduated high school at 15 and started college at 15, coming from New York. So I'm very marketing focused and not so much finance. So that was a big deal for us. But I love being able to pivot and have that flexibility.
And I think that's natural, though. I think anyone going into business, you go in from the standpoint of who you are and what you bring to the table. When investors talk about the team, that's what they're looking for, someone to know who they are, what they bring, but you know how to reach out to the other support that you need to sort of fill in what that looks like. And with a team perspective, sometimes, again, as entrepreneurs, especially A-type personalities, we think we know it all, and we can run through whatever it is we need to. But when we start seeing what is not working, and you start seeing information that tells you what does work. It's the smart entrepreneur that realizes, oh, but knowing how to read your numbers, knowing how to understand your numbers, I think is huge. And it's one thing starting out having to do projections. Sometimes you do what you have to do.
Right.
But at another point, you got to know when to look for more experience to help you model. And a lot of people don't think about the modeling part when they think about putting together projections.
Correct, and that's all it is.
Right.
Projections are a model. It's a financial model, and it should be an interactive model.
Right.
But going back to expanding your team, successful, using sports as an analogy, successful long-term coaches are usually those in any sport that realize their limitations and they bring others on to take care of their limitations and to do things that they can't do. I used to coach travel soccer teams. I never played a day of soccer in my life. I played football and lacrosse. I was very good at it. But I could coach, and I understood the strategy and understood how to put people on the field so that they would be successful as opposed to put them in a position to fail. I wasn't going to put a round peg in a square hole, but I couldn't teach the ball skills.
Okay.
So I would bring in trainers to teach the ball skills. I didn't know the strategy or the different lineups that you could have. I watch videos. So you have to learn. It's a continual learning process as well, but you have to be open to the fact that you don't know everything, and you have to bring in people that are experienced. I want to be the dumbest person around my advisory table. I want everybody else to be smarter than me.
Absolutely.
I agree.
So
Yeah, but I think you made a very valid point there, and as entrepreneurs,
about time I did. I got
and
one
I want
today.
to make sure I validated
There you go. I got one today.
And as entrepreneurs, it really is a matter of getting out of yourself sometimes in order for you to see the bigger picture and then bring those around you that are necessary. As we start winding down this segment, Arion, as it relates to projections and anything number-wise around that, is there any other question that you'd like to ask or any comment you'd want to make?
One major comment that I think that every entrepreneur should use is the ability to go outside of yourself and use whatever resources you have to gain that knowledge from someone who has it. I realize that it can be very intimidating to have to go out and find a mentor, or, consultants aren't cheap. So I definitely think that even if you go via LinkedIn and expand your network or find a friend who's really good. For instance, I have a friend who was a college roommate who works for the USPS, and she helped me streamline my shipping processes and get the weight down packed, and it saved us like $800 the first month. But I knew how to use those resources without paying, and sometimes it's a barter system to get what I needed to get and also help them. So definitely be open-minded. Nothing will be the way you think it will be in the beginning, and just be ready to delegate and pull on those resources.
Good for you. Demet, same thing. Any comment, question, anything that?
I think playing up on what you just said, being open, being realistic, and understanding that you have to really dive into the numbers. So what we do is we always ask a client, if you throw out the number $10 million, why? And then when you give me an answer, I say, why again? I drill down with the 5 whys. I keep asking why to get down to the nitty-gritty. How are you going to get there? Why are you going to get there? What makes you so special? Those are the kind of questions, and as long as you're realistic and you're honest with yourself, you have a better chance of being successful and being a long-term success in your business. And always start with the end in mind. Figure out what you want down the road, what your exit strategy is, and work backwards.
I love every time that you say that. One of my mottos is you build to your exit. So
Right.
I totally agree. Demet, thank you so much.
Thank you. There we
Thank
go.
you so much for joining us today. Arion, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much
Thank
for
you, Arion.
joining us. And thank you for joining us on this episode of Capital Academy. If you like what you're hearing and it resonates for you, find a way to plug in with us. And if you know someone that this information would make sense to, please make sure that you forward the information to them so that they might be able to plug in. So again, thank you for today, and we look forward to seeing you again on Capital Academy.